Good day, human Latiocytes. This is LatiosAzurill. Main series Pokemon games. I must say that they're always a blast, but which ones are the most enjoyable? I'm not talking about best region, best story, or most impressive at their release. I mean best to go back and play today. Also, to be clear, I'm only talking about the first games of each generation, so no third versions, remakes, or sequels, with the sole exception of Gold and Silver, since though they were sequels to Red, Blue, and Yellow, they were still the first games of Generation 2 and Johto. Although I might occasionally reference third versions, remakes, and sequels, they will not be considered in the ranking of the games, so they will not increase them for making improvements, nor decrease them for causing redundancy. Well, allow me to share my opinions of the best original main series Pokemon games of each generation. Pokemon Red and Blue. Okay, I'm not a Gen 1er. I do find Generation 1 extremely nostalgic, back to the days of playing Pokemon Blue on my Game Boy. However, I'm comparing these games by 2022 standards, and unfortunately for Red and Blue, time has not been too kind to them in comparison to newer games. Now, this is actually a good thing, as it shows Game Freak have shown massive improvement in their games over the years. This is by no means a knock on the original Red and Blue, as they were massively innovative for their time, but in terms of replayability, they're kind of a lackluster mess. Yes, I love that you can technically battle gyms 3 through 7 in essentially any order, except you need to beat Koga before Blaine. However, the levels are not scaled, so it feels kind of wrong to battle them in an inverted order. The PC system was a pain since you could not move Pokemon in the PC and had to save every time you switched boxes. Plus, it always sucked if you had a filled box and wanted to catch something but couldn't because you didn't change the box. The lack of running shoes also kinda sucks when returning these games years later. Additionally, since held items were not yet a thing, the experience share of those games, called the Experience All, split experience among all party members, like the modern day experience share, which is nice, except it resulted in getting minimal experience per Pokemon per battle, and took forever to get through the dialogue of each individual Pokemon getting the experience during the battle. Suffice to say, I didn't really find it worth using. I appreciate that the game's narrative is focused primarily on having an adventure with Pokemon in an effort to catch them all and beat the Pokemon League along the way, and casually take down the Yakuza while you're at it. The emphasis on Pokédex completion is noticeable through unlocking various items from Professor Oak's aides throughout the region as you catch various numbers of Pokemon. I will admit, though, that my favorite thing about Generation 1 is the glitches, and boy, there are a lot of them. They make the game a bit more interesting as they provide a fresher experience from the norm, which future Pokemon games just don't provide to the same extent. However, they have minimal impact on the overall gameplay in the long run. Sure, you could use glitches to get a level 100 Pokemon early on, but to me, at least, that kinda takes a lot of the fun out of the game. I like to have at least some level of challenge. In the end, Pokemon Red and Blue are impressive games in their own right, and paved a grand trajectory of future installments in the franchise, but in comparison don't quite stand up to those future games, as technology and Game Freak have added plenty of quality of life and narrative improvements over the years. Pokemon Diamond and Pearl. Let me just start by saying that Diamond and Pearl are killed by the frame rate, linear backtracking through the region, pacing, surfing speed, and balance. Admittedly, several of these issues are fixed in Platinum, but I'm specifically only considering Diamond and Pearl today. For starters, if you don't choose Chimchar, which I never do, you simply cannot get a Fire-type Pokemon until post-game unless you catch a Ponyta. That's it. It creates a very unbalanced game. At least Platinum added some Fire types during the main game, and Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl added some Fire-type encounters in the Underground to make up for it, but once again, that doesn't really help out good old Diamond and Pearl. As for backtracking, I get that backtracking can be a great way to place emphasis on how far you've come in your journey by returning somewhere and being able to access a new part of the area using what you've gained since the last time you were there. However, there's absolutely no reason for the gym after Eterna to be all the way in Veilstone. Fantina absolutely should have been the third gym leader. Game Freak even acknowledged this by rectifying it in Platinum. the pacing in these games are just all over the place, which results in a very unbalanced experience. As for the surfing speed, well, it's just too slow. You'd think Pokemon could swim a little faster, but I digress. Though to be fair, as these were the first main series games on the DS, it's kind of understandable that there were some movement speed and frame rate issues. Now, as negative as I sound, I must admit that I still really love these games. The story managed to build up to an engaging climax, although I don't really know how satisfying its conclusion was with Cyrus just planning to try again. However, the Pokemon in the game, balance notwithstanding, were great. The region was great, the lore was intriguing, and the characters were memorable. These games also had a decently lengthy post-game filled with legendary Pokemon. Unfortunately, the only battle facility was the Battle Tower, though Platinum rectified this with the Battle Frontier. Also, Super Contests were pretty cool, which included a twist, allowing you to dress up your Pokemon and have them dance in a rhythm game before the appeal portion of the contest. Ultimately, while not the best games in the series, Diamond and Pearl are still fun games to go back to. Pokemon Gold and Silver. Let me preface this by saying I love the Johto region and the Johto games. The Pokemon, the history, the lore, having two regions, being a legitimate follow-up to the original games, even culminating in a battle with your former self, the former protagonist Red. However, in a lot of ways, the games still fall somewhat short in comparison to other Pokemon games. One of the things that most people look back on most fondly of these games is having a second region to explore, Kanto, 2 years after your adventure there in Generation 1. However, in Generation 2, Kanto is a lot emptier than it was back in Generation 1. The problem is that people try to make two conflicting arguments about the games. The Johto main game is short, but there's a bigger post-game in another region. However, the other region is very empty. Some people claim that this shouldn't be that big of a deal because it's post-game. However, you can't really have it both ways. If Kanto was supposed to supplement the Johto content, then it shouldn't feel empty. But if Kanto is supposed to just be an added bonus to the Johto content, then the Johto content should feel bigger. Of course, that's not even the game's biggest problem. By far the biggest issue is the level curve. Even in the post-game, there are trainers with Pokemon under level 40. That just shouldn't happen. I love the little things in the game that require playing the game on certain days, like the bug catching contest, getting the weekly Lapras encounter, and finding Monica's sibling of the day, or requiring playing during certain times during the day, like day or night, in order to catch them all. It makes the game more like a real RPG experience. However, the pacing does not match the levels. While I appreciate that you can battle gyms 5 through 7 in whichever order you prefer, since it doesn't scale with your levels, it creates a very unbalanced experience. The level pacing goes up too slowly, and this makes it take even longer to train your Pokemon. Also, why do most of the gym leaders in Johto not use any Johto Pokemon? Faulkner should at least have a Hoot Hoot. Bugsy should at least have one of Johto's several bug Pokemon, and there is absolutely no reason for Morty to not have a Mischievous. Even Chuck should have a Hitmontop. It makes no sense for these gym leaders to exclusively use older Pokemon from Kanto. And why are there certain new Pokemon from Johto that are only available in Kanto? If they were Kanto native, then shouldn't they have canonically been available in Generation 1? Which they weren't? I'm looking at you, Murkrow and Slugma. I can understand holding off on Larvitar until getting to Mount Silver, but the rest of these just seem unnecessary. Overall, yes, I love these games, but they certainly do have their flaws. They have a lot of replay value, but compared to other later Pokemon games, fortunately, there has just been a lot of quality of life improvement. Pokemon Black and White. Pokemon Black and White are groundbreaking entries in the series. They introduce more new Pokemon than any other games in the franchise. My biggest grievance with Black and White was the lack of any Pokemon from Generations 1 to 4 until post-game. Although I appreciated the numerous new Pokemon they added, I still miss the old ones. Though, to be fair, at least the entire National Dex at the time was still available post-game. Though this lack of older Pokemon early on was remedied in their sequels, that doesn't really help out these games themselves. Although the game still used Pokemon sprites rather than 3D models, I did appreciate the little detail that tapping them on the menu would allow them to turn around, allowing you to see their back sprites. Yeah, it served no real purpose, but it was still cool. I like the Pokemon musical, but it was not the most interesting feature in the world, though it was still cute, I suppose. I will say that these games revolutionized the gyms by giving them personality. For instance, Striaton Gym was a restaurant, Lenora's Gym was a library and a museum, and Elisa's Gym was a roller coaster and an amusement park. Plus, in the actual story, unlike in pretty much any other Pokemon games before them, the gym leaders actually did something. They were involved in various conflicts, and helped fight off the 7 stages during the climax. I will say though, that one thing in them makes me kind of miss the days of the surprise, or at least attempted surprise champion. Lance, Steven, and Cynthia, for instance. With Alder straight up being introduced during his first appearance in the game as the champion, it kinda cheapened the whole being the champion thing for me, at least. It was admittedly a nice surprise to battle Enin Ghetsis at the end instead of Alder to compensate for this, though that unfortunately meant you couldn't really beat the champion until the postgame. As for the story, I felt it was very compelling, but I never really liked how, although En was confident in his beliefs about what he was doing, he abandoned them all after discovering that Ghetsis was using him, which in turn undermined the question of ethics of catching and raising Pokemon. Overall, Pokemon Black and White were great games with a great narrative. Although they were not perfect, they just proved not everything in the world is simply black or white. Pokemon X and Y. Let me preface this with a reminder that this is subjective. It is an opinion. I am admittedly partial to Generation 6. I love the graphics, the music, the region, and the Pokemon. As for the games themselves, well, they're good. I certainly enjoy using Mega Evolution and getting a bonus Kanto starter early in the game after starting with a Kalos one. I love the unique feel of the Kalos region, especially the detail behind locations like Parfum Palace and Lumiose City. I love shiny hunting by chain fishing and horde encounters. I also really like rotation battles, which were kept from Black and White, and also the newly introduced inverse battles. It was kind of sad to see these with triple battles gone in Generation 7. I appreciated the experience share becoming a key item, reminiscent of the experience all of Generation 1. This way, switch training could become a thing of the past. Of course, these games are far from perfect. The experience share, while I see it as a positive change, also makes the game very easy, though you can admittedly just turn it off. The Elite Four members each only use 4 Pokemon. Suffice to say, X and Y could have certainly benefited from having Black and White 2's challenge mode as an option. Additionally, there was not a whole lot of interesting battling to do in the postgame. It was quite a letdown to go from the Pokemon World Tournament in Black and White 2, which was alongside the Battle Subway, to just the Looker missions and the Battle Mason in X and Y. However, I should probably address the elephant in the room: the plot. The story in X and Y is all over the place. It's about a madman who wants to essentially kill everyone and start from scratch with just his followers and the subsequent elimination of all Pokemon. Yes, they tried to make Lysandre a little less one-dimensional by having him cry over the idea of killing all Pokemon, but that doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. The admins and scientists are all one-dimensional. The goal is way too similar to Cyrus's plan in Diamond and Pearl, albeit with more of a focus on the killing than the creating of a new universe. While I appreciate the motif about beauty and preservation versus change, Team Flare just didn't help it effectively get that point across. Blue, Lance, Steven, Cynthia, and even Alder each had some kind of relevance to the plot of their respective games. However, Diantha, who had the potential to be a great champion, had little to nothing to do with the plot, being a famous actress met only twice and then revealed in the very end to be the champion. Yes, I appreciate a surprise champion, but I would prefer for it to be someone meaningful throughout the story, so that revelation has some value. As for the story itself, it is really about AZ, but he barely has any screen time, and as satisfying as the post-champion ceremony and battle scene is, it doesn't really make up for the rest of the game. So yes, Pokemon X and Y aren't perfect, but the mechanics, region, and graphics make them, for me at least, a beautiful journey I'm always happy to explore again. Pokemon Sun and Moon. I will always enjoy the Alola games. I love the tropical atmosphere, the unique new Pokemon, and the new twist on the gym system, Trials in the Island Challenge. The games just felt like the Pokemon game equivalent to a vacation. One complaint I do have about the story, though, is showing Lily running from Aether Paradise at the beginning. They built up to the Aether Foundation being the true villains like it was supposed to be a surprise after essentially showing you that before you even started the game. Aside from that, the story was top-notch. In fact, probably my favorite actual main story from a main series Pokemon game to date. I definitely appreciate the arc that Lily went through as you progress through the story. It's one of the few times that a major character in a Pokemon game actually changed as a result of their arc throughout the game. And the change in Lily's character model reflects that change. The whole concept of Lily's family dynamic makes for a compelling plot. It's refreshing how the plot can be big while on a small scale, where the stakes are a Pokemon and a family, not the entire region, or the entire universe. As for the new gimmick the game's introduced, the Z-moves, I personally like them, but could live with them or without them. They're a nice addition to turn a challenging battle around in one turn, but are limited in that they can only be used once. Though this is probably for the best, otherwise they'd be way too broken. I really appreciate how they give some moves like Conversion and Splash new utility and allow an easy one-hit knockout against certain opponents during the game. Plus, it's nice to have a mechanic added that benefits every Pokemon, not just those blessed with the ability to Mega Evolve. My favorite thing about them, though, is that the Z Crystals are kind of like gym badges collected in Alola, but unlike gym badges, they themselves have actual utility. Though the coding in Generation 1 games suggests that the badges were originally supposed to have their own utility. So, this is a nice nod to that. Ultimately, Sun and Moon were just fun, relaxing, refreshing entries into the franchise, and I'm always happy to revisit them. Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. It's no secret that Hoenn is my favorite region, even if it has too much water. But all kidding aside, it does have a nice, somewhat tropical setting, which I always appreciate. For me, a lot of my love for these games has to do with nostalgia. Even though I have the same nostalgia for Generations 1 and 2, these were the first games after the shift to the more modern era of Pokemon, being beyond 8-bit, having full color, not having to save the game every time you want to change the box, having running shoes, having natures and abilities, and so on. Are these games perfect? No. Are there improved versions like Emerald and Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire? Of course there are. But that doesn't take away from these games. There's a reason why Ruby has always been my favorite game on which to build a mod. As such, I'm always happy to take another journey in Hoenn in Ruby and Sapphire. Pokemon Sword and Shield. Pokemon Sword and Shield were a giant step forward for the franchise. I will be the first to admit that I'm not a huge fan of Dynamax, but I appreciate the gym challenge being the central focus of the narrative. As for the main game, Chairman Rose's plot subtly built up to very slowly, seeing the mines and learning that's where Rose started, seeing where he converts energy in Hammerlock while he conveniently leaves out the details, learning about the ancient heroes and the darkest day in small batches of information, Leon's disappearance in the wind, and ultimately the interruption of the championship battle. But it's still refreshing to see the gym challenge be given a new spin, stadiums forming a league, with the game's focus being placed on the gym challenge itself. I also appreciated saving the biggest city in the region, Winden, for the end of the game, rather than just starting in the biggest city and then practically never looking back, like Hau'oli City and Alola. The characters went through meaningful arcs and changed throughout the progression of the story. For instance, Sonia became the professor, Hop became Sonia's assistant, and Leon started running the battle tower after being defeated. Yes, Team Yell didn't need to exist from a narrative perspective, but it was clearly a reference to actual football fans in UK. Clearly, I should address the Caparage in the room, Dexit. While I'm not personally a fan of such a decision, it didn't entirely ruin the game for me. Unlike with Black and White, the lack of the national dex only really directly impacts post-game. But by then, the game's story is already completed. The original post-game with Swordbird and Shieldbird is beyond stupid, but the DLC areas really help flush out the post-game. Oh, for an extra 50% of the game's retail value, it better have. That's without even mentioning the steps forward the game took with the Wild area. Ultimately, Sword and Shield are amazing games that give me great hope for the future of the franchise with Scarlet and Violet. And there you have it. Once again, please keep in mind that these are just my opinions. please leave your opinions in the comments below. And as always, like, comment, subscribe, and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.